Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Zoo and Co. show. I'm your host Ayu, and in my company today, I've got no one. Honestly, I'm pretty surprised I can still remember the intro after all this time. Yeah, it'll just be me this time in a presumably shorter episode. I don't think I'd be able to monologue for 45 minutes to an hour, but I suppose you, the viewer, would be able to see by the timestamps how long I end up rambling for. Disclaimer: I ramble on for 45 more minutes. Typically, at this point, if I had a guest, I think I would ask them a silly question, right? That's what I've been doing the past few episodes. I come up with I think I called it a question of the day. I think I want to rebrand to dumb debate of the day, where I ask like a really silly question, like, what's your favorite Skittles color, and then make people defend their answer. I kind of like that segment idea, to be honest. I quite like make people argue about something completely asinine, and then, that really gets you. I don't know. Does that familiarize you with the guest? Does that make it? Is it like a fun way to introduce someone? Anyways, I don't want to waste a good question. I have a list of them. I don't want to waste a good question on this episode today where it's just me. So leave a comment about, I don't know, give me your freaking New Year's resolution or something. That'll be the dumb debate of the day. Give me your New Year's resolution. My New Year's resolution for 2023 is to hit 160 pounds. Uh, but caveat with like this with a specific weight, like muscle to body fat ratio, I guess. um, Very ambiguous and vague, so I can decide whether I've met that goal or not. But the main hurdle to overcome is putting on weight and getting the calories in. Anyways, where did I go? Part one of this episode. Where did I go? If I was less lazy, or had more editing prowess, or had an editor, I would have created some sort of transition at this stage. But I don't, and I'm lazy. So I'm going to split up this episode into a couple different parts, and I'll start with where'd I go? What have I been up to? Not to recount my entire life story between the last episode, like a year and a half ago, to now. I'm sure I could stretch out that period into many different episodes for the maximum amount of content that I can farm. But honestly, a lot has happened in a year and a half. I went back to look up the last video when it was posted. What it's about. Get accustomed back to like how I was even running these shows, as poorly done as they were. And last time I filmed this was in like September of 2021. Remember 2021? Yeah, that's what, like 15 months ago now, something like that. Real embarrassing if I got that wrong. And I was trying to remember, like, what was I doing in September 2021? What was life like? What was I doing in terms of school, work, whatever? And oh my god, I really had to wind back the clock, take a trip down memory lane to see, or try to remember what the hell life was like a year and a half ago. 2021, I was in my last year of school. It was in the fall term, so I had one more term after that in winter/spring of 2022. I looked at the courses I was taking to really refresh like what I was doing at the time, and oh my god, September of 2021, right when I had started school at that point. What a different time. Big highlights since then, I guess. Finished school. Yay, graduated. That's a really big one. I finished my university degree. I did a degree in commerce, Bachelor of Commerce. I had a specialization in organizational behavior and human resources. I love human resources. Um, Foreshadowing that led to me getting a job in HR. I had an internship last summer, and then was really lucky to have converted that to a full-time opportunity. I mean, I could go about my work experience for ages at this point. I talk about it all the time. It's crazy to me that now I'm on the other end of coffee chats, that I'm having coffee chats with people younger than me or even my age or older than me, and telling them about the company that I work at and the work that I do. I think it's crazy. But we'll save that for another time. We'll go through all the businessy nerdy stuff in maybe a separate episode. Maybe I'll have someone on for that. So yeah, finished school, got a job. I've been really happy with my job. all things considered. I really do love it there. It's super fast paced, super dynamic, often stressful, but that's also kind of what I'm looking for. I've really had the opportunity to push myself at the start of my career, to work super hard, and I don't know, go outside my comfort zone, take on projects that I really enjoy and think are interesting, and at least my hope is that I've really been able to grow and learn a lot as an individual at the early stage of my career thus far. So that happened. And outside of the big, school and work, I guess, I during that period of time did a little bit of debate. It was the first time I've done competitive debate since high school, because I quit after I started in university. Just didn't really like the scene. Went back, did a little bit of it, had a lot of fun. Went to a big debate slash case competition in the business world. Got fucking shit on. Was the captain of my team and led us to a fantastic seventh, tied fifth to eighth place finish when there were only 9 teams because we lost in quarters. So a little bit embarrassing. Don't have to talk about that. And coached a little bit of frisbee as well. Yeah, who would have thought? Basically stopped playing frisbee after university started too, right? I know some of the episodes that I had on before this were talking about like, oh, maybe I want to play frisbee again, alti. Didn't end up playing any competitive frisbee. A little bit of recreational stuff here and there, with school in the VUL, as you typically do. But I ended up coaching a little bit. Coached my old high school. It's a good time. Might go back do that again this time. Who knows? And yeah, good time. Really, I feel looking back in the last year and a half, I've gotten a lot of things right with my life. I've got myself on track when it comes to a lot of things. Living arrangement wise, I feel, or I guess we'll start, financially independent, self-supporting. That's been a big goal of mine for a really long time, and I'm really glad that right out of university I was able to kind of get a stable job, right? Kickstart a stable career. Fingers crossed. You never know with tech layoffs right now. And sort things out money wise. Have some savings. Start saving for more important things like a down payment. Maybe a car, maybe a wedding. Who knows? Really started taking care of my health in the last about half a year or so. Last summer I had a pretty bad hamstring injury, and that really, I guess, encouraged me, prompted me to start taking better care of my health, do a lot more strength and conditioning, focus on recovery, prevention of injuries, go to physio for the first time in ever, and started gymming again. But this time, now that I have money to buy my own groceries, actually with a good diet to support it, so I can put on weight until I hit 160 pounds by the end of the year. So yeah, life's been good. It's been good. Some up and downs. It's kind of hard looking back in the last 15 months, I think I said, to really pinpoint all the small stuff that's happened, right? If I did this podcast weekly, I'm sure, every other episode there'd be oh my god, this happened, this crazy story happened. But looking back at the last year and a half, it's been a good run. I've been well. Thank you to all my friends who have been with me throughout that time. Sorry, I've been busy. Haven't really been reaching out to anyone. So if you're watching this and we haven't talked in a year and a half or so, hit me up. My bad. I'm kind of a shitty texter now. It takes me like a full business day to respond because I never have a messenger open. Yeah, miss a lot of my friends. Once I get work stuff a little bit more sorted out, get used to my schedule, make sure I'm not tired, dead by the time I come home from the office, and once I'm not just napping all day on the weekends, I'll work on the social life again, I guess. How long has it been? 8-10 minutes? Damn. Monologuing is hard. Anyways, that's the life summary. That's the unsolicited, you didn't ask for it, I told you about it anyways. What have I been doing in the last year and a half? Next question. Why did I go? What happened? Why did I stop making the podcast? To be frank, honestly, I didn't really like the first 12 episodes that I made. is that too like? Is that too? Is that too direct? Is that too like on the nose? Just like I didn't like it. Wasn't feeling it anymore. Um, I don't want to say I'm a perfectionist. That's overdone, boring. I have high expectations for myself. I have high standards for myself. And when I went back and watched the 12 episodes that I made, right, skip through it just to see what I was doing back then, or not when I went back, every time I went back to take a look at all the stuff that I'd created, I just wasn't feeling it, you know? There were so many questions that I had about my own content that I just didn't have the answers to. So it wasn't that I didn't know what was wrong. I knew there were a lot of things that I wanted to change, that I didn't really like, that I wanted to make better, but I didn't know how I wanted to make it better. I didn't know what the end goal was, right? So I have all these questions, all these questions that not just questions that I ask myself, but even questions that some of my close friends or maybe family members that watch this podcast brought up to me, and they led to, I guess, a lot of roadblocks when it came to improving the content. So, for example, a big one was production quality. I have really high standards for, not high stand, I have really high hopes for what I want the production quality of the podcast to be, right? I watched this one podcast that I think is very well produced, but that's because they have a actual producer that sits behind the computer, right? Operates all the different things while the four people are talking on the podcast. So that's a little bit different. That's a little tough. This producer has significant background in producing and production, so can't really compete with that. But even the small stuff, even if I'm not getting fancy with green screen bits and stuff like that, it's the camera quality. Funny story, prior to I think this episode, I couldn't figure out why all my old ones were not recorded in 1080p, even though my webcam supports 1080. And apparently it's because the specific webcam I have, when you plug into OBS, which is what I record with, it defaults to 640 by 480p or something stupid like that. So I don't know, I just never thought to look into it, of why the quality was so bad, even though I spent $100 on this camera. So video quality, audio quality is a big one. I have some pretty nice microphones, but this room is pretty bad, I think, acoustics wise. I put up some soundproofing panels kind of on the wall, as you can't see, but I just have no furniture in here, right? It's a tiny den. This is the entirety of the room. Behind the camera is basically just the wall. So I mean, I guess I moved an office chair out of here so the background looks a little bit cleaner, but there's no furniture to soak up the noise. It's just empty and echoey, and I'm sure there are settings that I could adjust on OBS or on the microphone to make it sound better, but not a sound engineer. Sorry, maybe I'll look into it in the future. So audio quality I wasn't too happy with. The lighting, I don't have natural light. There's no windows in this room. I have a desk lamp that I point straight into my face to make it look a little bit better. And it was only today, recording this 13th episode after a year and a half, that my girlfriend was like, why don't you put a tissue paper over the light so it dampens it a little bit. It's not hard light right on your face. There's production quality of the visuals. Oh my gosh, excuse me. The visuals of the podcast video, I guess you would call it, itself. So I really, back when I was recording these episodes a year and a half, 2 years ago, I really wanted to invest some time into making pretty visuals. So I have the nice whatever galaxy pastel-y background that my girlfriend made for me. I now will have this nice little cloud border, ooh, fancy reveal, around my face and or any guests that I have. Thank you to my unpaid intern, aka sister, who made that for me. And yeah, an intro, outro, the typical YouTube stuff, right? Video stuff that you would want. So I mean, I guess I wasn't too unhappy with it. I like the improvements that I've made to that aspect of the production quality, but there's of course always going to be, I could always animate the intro better. I could always do whatever better, right? Make the video visuals prettier, etc., etc. But I think even more bothersome to me was the actual content itself. The type of content, what I was talking about with people, the length of the content, different bits and segment ideas, a lot of things that I just still had to figure out and didn't really like about the episodes that I had recorded previously. The type of content was kind of like, it was a big question that I often got asked. I would, drop like in a some icebreaker activity at work or something. I'd be like, oh, I used to have a podcast. Like, I have a podcast. And then people would ask, what's the podcast about? And every single time I would find myself saying, just shit, just banter. I just talk with friends about stuff, about whatever we want to talk about. And although there's nothing, I guess, inherently wrong with that, it also feels like when you're first starting a podcast, or God forbid, marketing a podcast, right? Telling people about it and trying to show people your content, not having an area of focus is pretty tough when it comes to like audience retention. People don't really come to my podcast for anything specific. They put it on to pass time while they're doing homework or at the gym or sleep, which one of my friends told me, shit, whatever works for you, right? Thanks. So what we, the type of content and what I want to talk about was always a big question to me. And I didn't have the answer, right? I had the question. The question is like, do I want to focus my content around something specific? But I never had an answer. I like the idea of having friends come on and just talking about whatever is relevant at the time or whatever speaks out to them and getting a good conversation going and digging at nuggets of wisdom from, I don't want to, be rude, but like ordinary people, right? Kind of like a Humans of New York style. You grab a random person, you get a really good conversation going and show that the conversation itself can be interesting, even if neither person is a crazy character or a crazy speaker per se. And I like that idea. But I think one of the best received episodes that I filmed was the episode about the Kim's Convenience controversy that I did with Cassidy, where it had a very specific focus about a like small controversy that had popped up in, admittedly a very small social circle as well, in like subtle Asian traits on a Facebook group catered specifically towards East Asian people. But that was really well received, in part I think because it had a very specific focus. It had a fairly detailed run of the show in terms of what we were going to be talking about, and it felt more organized and coherent, right? So I absolutely see the benefit of having a podcast like that. And there's also the question of the kind of the length of the podcast, right? So I got feedback from a lot of friends saying, an hour is like, it's pretty long. No one's really watching it for an hour. And I honestly understand. To be frank, looking back, I don't know why I was so stuck up on the idea that I wanted my podcast to be an hour long. Like in retrospect, it seems very excessive. But I guess that's in part because I really like long podcasts. I watch like esports podcasts that are 2-3 hours long because I leave it on while I'm at work, working through some Excel sheets that don't require too much thinking and stuff like that. So, the adjustment made this time is this episode will probably be shorter or not. I don't know how long I'm going to ramble for. And going forward, I'll probably have significantly shorter episodes as well with different people. And then there was also the discussion in my own head regarding different bits and segments that I wanted to do on the podcast. So some of the podcasts that I like, some of the podcasts that I like watching, they have kind of funny segments that they do. It's not just one topic that you discuss for, let's say, 45 minutes, an hour or whatever, but they'll have different like segments, right? Like sections. So one that I came up with that I really like, I alluded to it at the start of this episode, is the dumb debate of the day, right? A really silly question. God, I wish I had a better example. I've got to have it up here somewhere. Maybe I'll go look it up. But I don't want to spoil the questions that I have either. So the first time I did that was the Skittles question when I had 3 people on talking about video games or whatever. Oh, here we go. I think these are some of the ones I used in the past. Like, what are your top 3 vegetables? How many bubble tea pearls do you think you could fit in your mouth? What are your top 3 fries? And those are kind of boring. Those even aren't like the top 3 isn't even that creative. And this one, what's better, carpet, tiles, or hardwood flooring? Right, like these types of silly questions to introduce guests. Like I kind of like that as an idea. I think there's an idea thrown around back and forth about Cassidy giving like nuggets of wisdom at the end of the episodes and stuff like that. Or I had an idea to have the current guest on whichever episode ask a question or bring up like a topic of discussion for the next guest that comes, even though they have no idea who the next guest is, and the next guest will not, really know what the question that's going to be asked is. So all these different bits, ideas, segment ideas, and it just never really came together. I didn't know, would it be too random if I included too much of them? Like I haven't even figured out the question of what do I want the content to be about, right? So you add in all these segments and it, I don't know, raises more questions than it answers, I suppose. All of these questions, all these roadblocks in terms of what I want this podcast to look like. And all of it kind of culminates into the biggest final roadblock obstacle question that I had for myself, which is ultimately, what's the goal, right? I would like to consider myself an individual that has a purpose when I do things. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with the podcast. I know I liked it. I like the podcast. It's a good time, filming it, even monologuing to myself sometimes. But I don't know where I wanted to go with it. Would it be like, the goal's never been to get big. That's not really the point. It's a little shallow. I'm not really trying to monetize it. I'm not trying to necessarily make this a living. It's definitely a hobby. But then, do I hope people will see it? Do I try to tailor it towards a more mass audience kind of friendly version of the podcast? Do I keep it very, very cult classic insider, like you have to be in at the start of the podcast to get all the inside jokes that I'm making type of vibe, or what? And without that overarching goal and vision as to what I want the podcast to be like, it was tough to find motivation to keep going, right? And I told you a little bit about what I've been up to the last year and a half or so. Shit's been busy. I mean, I work 9 to 5. I come home, I'm tired. I go to the gym and meal prep for the next day, and it's about all the time that I got, right? I always found myself thinking, I want to do the podcast at some point. I want to go back to it. I did like it. I do like it. I want to continue with it, and then just I'll go back to it next week, turns into I'll go back to it next month, turns into I'll go back to it next year, and then here we are 15 months later with nothing new on the channel. So I could ramble on for a little bit longer, but I think in the interest of you, the viewers' time and patience, I will keep to my promise of making it shorter. Last question is, what's next? Well, why am I here? Why am I here today, now, recording this episode? What do I want to do with the podcast? And I don't know. I just kind of want to do it again, to be honest. I do like this podcast. I said that. I have a good time with it. I think it's cool. It's kind of a quirky thing to, I have a podcast. It's not a quirky thing. Now that I've said that out loud, that is so cringe. That is like literally the most tech bro thing you could do, right? COVID happened, and then you got a job in tech, and now suddenly you want a podcast. Ugh, I hate it. But regardless, I want to share a quick story. This was not a good segue, but I want to share a quick story of a YouTube comment that led to me recording this episode today and getting started again with the pod. It's really stupid because I don't even remember the specific wording of the comment anymore. I just have the general gist of like what was said in my mind. And essentially it was on, I don't even know what video it was on. It was on a video, I think, about tips for like cracking into YouTube or something. Like a YouTube short about how to reach a wider audience on YouTube. I don't know why I was watching that. I didn't search it up. I think it was just somebody recommended. And one of the comments was some dude saying, oh, I don't know, like I've started a dozen different podcasts, but it was just never what I liked. And then I stopped, right? I stopped every single time. And the first reply to it was something around the lines of, I will be there when you succeed on your 100th podcast. Something around those lines. That was the gist of it. And I'm not typically the type of person to read scroll past a motivational video on YouTube and really find inspiration from that. But that one kind of hit me, to be honest. Right? I read that, and it was two random internet strangers. One of them saying, on a video, commenting on a video that most likely the creator was not going to reply to, just kind of venting out their frustration that I have so many ideas for content. I've posted a bajillion things that just never got any traction, and I don't know what I want to do with it. It feels like I failed in all the shows I've created before. And then another random internet stranger coming along and saying, okay, well, best of luck, and I'll be there watching your videos when your 100th podcast succeeds. I was like, damn, what's my excuse? Right? I don't even consider this podcast a failure per se. I just don't really vibe with the content. I think there could be improvements, but only 13 episodes in now as of this one, right? It's a far cry from having a dozen different shows and deeming that all of them are failures. And another part to this story is the other day, this was literally 2-3 days ago, I was having a little call with a friend of mine who may make an appearance in the podcast eventually. I'm gonna try to drag him into it. You know who you are. And I was showing him like some cringe videos that I had made in like high school or like in first year university or something, just like the most disgusting, oh my god, I cannot believe that I put thought into this and actually posted this, and it's probably like an unlisted video on YouTube on an old email account or something. And maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. Some of them I'm not too embarrassed by, but I was looking at some of the ideas that I had in the past for content that I wanted to make, and I was like, there's some legs to it. I could make this happen. And one of them was a really, really old video. Oh my god, it's been, almost a decade now since I posted that. That's great, like 8 or so years since I posted it. And although it was pretty embarrassing, right? It was like I was in early high school, 14 years old when I posted it. It was a little bit nostalgic. It was a little bit like, a blast from the past. I spent some time doing this. I remember when I was making this video, this is what I was thinking. Oh, this is going to be so hype. And sure, everything in retrospect looks cringe, but there's a fine line between cringe and, sweet and, that's a funny video, funny idea from way back. It's kind of like looking at, like baby pictures, right? You might look back or, looking at high school pictures like, oh god, that's ugly. I can't believe I look like that. But at the same time, it's, wow, that was me at a certain point in time. And that person that I'm looking at in the photo had their entire lives ahead of them, and so much time has passed since then. And I thought about that after that happened, and really that motivated me to want to come back to the podcast, because all the shitty episodes that I had recorded before, at least it's there, right? At least I can watch it and go back and say, okay, this is an interesting conversation I had with a friend. I enjoyed all the conversations, full disclosure, right? Like, don't get it twisted. I had a great time recording it, and I really enjoyed the opportunity being able to speak to my friends and talk about these topics. I just don't think production quality wise, I don't think, the output wise, it wasn't edited. It was shitty podcast in that sense. Not that I didn't enjoy speaking to those people. But at least I got it out, right? And I was able to go back and watch those. And best case scenario, in my ideal world, I would be able to use this podcast as a bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Not a chronology per se. Storybook? Bit of a storybook. Trip down memory lane, we'll say. when I look back on my life, and that's dramatic. When I look back, okay, and I can relive through, this time period of my life while I was, no, there is a word for it, chronicling my life. You get the point. Keeping track of, it's like vlogging my life. And so that's what brings us back. That's why we're here. Thank you to that random stranger in the motivational YouTube comment section. Thank you to my friend who I was having a good old laugh about watching these old cringe videos and, encouraging me to get back on this. And I guess the last question is, what's going to change, if anything, about the podcast? I've already hinted at some of the stuff. There's probably going to be shorter. Going to revisit some of the content, nothing definitive yet, but probably going to change a little bit how it works. I don't have a guest on this time. It's just me monologuing because everyone's busy, and that's okay. We're all adults now and we have our own lives. But there's some other stuff as well. I think in the last year or so, I've gained a lot of new and different social media influences when it comes to like my feed. That's a really roundabout way of saying that now I watch a lot of cooking videos and my feed is different. The content I consume is different. So that's given me a new perspective on how I could potentially produce content for my audience. Sorry, I have to interject here. This creaky chair that probably makes it into the recording is driving me nuts. And I'm looking straight at the camera for half of this video, and I have no idea if it's unsettling or if it's like actually good. Regardless, I digress. New social media influences. So it's nothing concrete in terms of I watch cooking videos and this is how they edit their videos, so now my podcast episodes are going to look like this. But you'll probably subtly see some of the influences of different types of content find its way into these videos. If nothing else, I hope at the very least that by recording more episodes, it improves my own ability to talk, right? To direct conversation or just monologue myself and keep it interesting, have interesting, not just interesting topics that I talk about, but also have an interesting and engaging voice, right? The typical public speaking stuff. Make sure I maintain engaging intonation, maintain appropriate volume, pacing, all the stuff like that. All the stuff that I used to teach to, debaters and public speakers when I used to do that as a side hustle. And the last part of the puzzle, God, I have terrible transitions. I just keep saying, and the last part of the puzzle is how I'm going to be approaching making episodes, which seems weird because it seems like a massive topic that could, merit a full 10 minutes on its own. But basically what I'm trying to get at is that since I've started working full time, the way that I approach work, full-time job, career, work, has seeped more and more into how I approach other things in life. Which isn't in and of itself a good or bad thing, but I've just found myself to be a lot more straightforward, logical, problem solving, I guess I would say, when it comes to day-to-day stuff, rather than being more emotional and then easily affected by the environment around me, right? Of course, if I'm at work and something goes wrong, yes, we're not robots. It's perfectly reasonable to be frustrated by your situation or stressed out or whatever. But at the end of the day, the work needs to get done, right? I got to earn my paycheck and shit gets pushed out, right? Deliverables have to be met. And I found that to be a fairly positive influence on my life. I kind of like the direction that I've been going in terms of being able to problem solve very, very quickly, very effectively. Critical thinking skills are on the rise again after taking a massive dip in university when I didn't do anything but regurgitate information to pass my courses. And I think I would like to take that approach to the podcast as well. Methodical. What's that? Methodical. I was thinking of methodology. Methodical approach to the podcast. And I would even go as far as to say that, like, when I'm now prepping prepping for these podcasts and recording them, I'm using a lot of small tips and tricks that you would probably see in the office as well, right? So imagine this podcast was a meeting. I'm coming in with notes. I don't want to rely on just the idea that, or the notion that, oh, everyone's going to have a wonderful discussion and then good things will come of it. You want some action items that you want to discuss, right? So now I'm starting to have runs for the shows, or, like notes for the shows before I start. I have an end goal in mind. You wouldn't want to hop into a meeting and just talk for 45 minutes and then, yay, all fun and good. There are some specific outcomes that you want coming out of the meeting. So for me, in relation to the podcast, I kind of have an idea of what I want the end product to look like, what the video to look like, but I have to direct the conversation in that direction, right? I want there to be a takeaway from the podcast, or at the very least, I want there to be a more clear narrative, sequential order, chronology to what I'm talking about, rather than just a ramble for 45 minutes straight. The last piece to how many times have I said the last piece, or like the next piece? Another piece of this idea of bringing work, the work capitalist approach, me, Mr. Capitalism now, of bringing the work approach into the podcast and my hobbies, is that at work, I find that I'm very motivated and driven, right? I get given a problem by my manager or another team, and I go, yeah, let me look into it. I'll solve it for you. I'll find out and I'll figure it out. Whereas when it came to the podcast, I was often limited by my own mentality, limited by constraints that I mentally imposed on myself, right? I don't have enough time to edit the videos, so I'm not going to bother learning editing. I'm not going to add any fancy editing bits anyways. The podcasts are too long. I don't really want to produce it. I just want to record it and then add the intro, outro, and then send it off. I wasn't previously doing a lot of research as to how to improve my podcast, which seems really weird because at work, or in my professional career, I guess, I want to do better, right? I want to take the next step in my career. I want to get a certification, go to a conference, take a course, I was going to say get certified again, but I'm just repeating myself. I want to learn more and grow. And then when it came to my hobbies, and let's say, for example, doing this podcast, I just never thought maybe I should read a book, right? Maybe I should watch some videos. There's so many things I can improve about the podcast, whether that's all the stuff we talked about earlier, whether that's production quality, content, and how I can be a better speaker, be a better podcast host, how I could just do better on YouTube, right? Find out how to work the algorithm a little bit better and make my descriptions prettier, fancier, use YouTube end cards, annotations, all that stuff. There's tons of things to learn. So I think now that I have that attitude at work, I would like to bring that a little bit more into my personal life and hobbies as well. So I'm hoping to see the results of that. And that's about it. I'm pretty surprised that I ended up rambling for 40 minutes when it was just me, myself, and I. If anyone is actually watching this after all this time, all 3 of you, thank you. Appreciate it. I promise I'll put some more episodes out every now and then if any of you are interested. And thank you to those of you who are sticking around. I really enjoy having this podcast as a bit of an outlet to clear out some of my thoughts, put some stuff out into the world, and also have a bit of I really should have looked up the word. A bit of a... Damn. It's kind of fucked up my whole flow. I won't lie to you. Bit of a memory book to look back on in the future. Thumbs up. I mean, that's about it. Do I have I don't really have a conclusion or anything. I have an outro, right? Do I have an outro?